There appears to be less distraction.
Right, but there isn't, because the distraction, the apparent distraction that's there and the chattering is all imaginary. Everything that people are talking about doesn't exist, it's just fantasy. Talk about what happened, you're not talking about what happened, you're talking about an idea that's floating through your mind. You talk about
making noise.
Yeah.
What about the experience of silence?
What experience of silence?
Well, if I listen very carefully, of course, there are a lot of other sounds, but there seems to be some sort of relaxation I experience in connection with the silence or the quietening down of the voices and the connection.
Sure, but what's relaxation? What is it when relaxation is there? What is it when relaxation isn't there?
Mm.
Is it really different?
Well, when we were talking on Friday about how one comes with the other.
Mm-hmm. When you're chatting and distracted and caught up in concepts, there's no more or less going on than when you're sitting in silence and just noticing the openness and the astoundingness. They're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to stop the uproar to go to silence. The silence is always there, in the background, so to speak, even as the uproar, so to speak, is always there in the foreground or whatever.
I think the only difference would be the interpretation of it.
Of course, which is a fantasy.
So just saying, this is a distraction or this is silence.
Sure, of course. But it's very relevant from the so-called spiritual point of view to notice how our chatter is pure fantasy. When we're talking about things, we're talking about fantasies.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But they're not distractions from anything. There's nothing happening that's not always happening.
Right.
And even all of this chatter doesn't actually create anything. When we think we're talking about something, it's easy to fall into the fantasy that there is something that we're talking about.
Yeah.
It becomes a self-fulfilling
Yes.
creative process. We talk about yesterday, all of a sudden we've created a yesterday that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But we can notice that we aren't and still enjoy the chatter. We can notice the true context, which is always this astoundingness, this amazing openness. So noticing is not mutually exclusive with anything else, with any other activity, with any other conditions.
Yeah.
And noticing is ultimately noticing how astounding this is, how this is so far beyond anything you can think it is.
There does seem to be a difference in focus.
Mm-hmm.
That's called focus.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That when it seems to get quiet, there's a more awareness of the, I'll call it internal chatter or whatever, the other things going on that seem to be something that I might call inside. I mean, it all seems very insubstantial, but there does seem to be some kind of a, when there's activity in the room, when there's talking and there's interacting and there's relationships going on, there's some kind of sense of focus.
Yeah. And what is that?
I don't know.
Yeah. What is it? It's very interesting. Mm-hmm. And it's not the opposite of anything else. Focus isn't actually the opposite of unfocused or less focused.
But it also doesn't seem to have anything to do with the stuff of what's happening. I mean, whatever's happening here, it seems to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some kind of difference in focus. I don't know what focus is, though. I don't know what's focusing, what's looking.
Yeah, well, notice that. That's very interesting. Focus is fascinating. and the mobility of consciousness. This can experience itself from, with absolute variability from any point of view. And this mode of being able to experience itself from any point of view is, part of that is what we call focus. That it zooms in, it zooms out, it gets specific, it drops the specificity and just sort of spaces out, or it gets more passive. And, is any one mode more genuine or more real or more true than another mode? When you're focused in, is it actually truer or sharper than when you're spaced out? It's always this experiencing this, and any mode that it presents itself in is still that. So when it's sharp and pure and you're off and running with the events, it's that. When you're in passivity and open and with the subtlety, it's that. And there's no gain or loss of quality. It's just variable, the infinite variability of the way this can appear to itself.
There seems to be no connection between focus and content.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Did you say no?
No connection.
No connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Focus is the dynamism of consciousness, and content is the radiant expression of consciousness, and they both are absolutely autonomous, spontaneous, and unique in the sense that they have nothing to do with anything else other than themselves at that instant, so to speak.
And following from that, there can be no distractions.
Right. Because, and this is it. In spirituality, is very subtle. It's very easy to get into a subtle, or in most cases, maybe not so subtle gamesmanship of playing one condition of focus off against another, one state of noticing something versus not noticing, or defined as not noticing off against another. One's condition of energy of this or this, as superior, inferior, advantageous or disadvantageous. But is that really true? When we look at what the actual event is in the instant, does it ever deviate from itself? It's always just this. You could be in a heated argument with some asshole that cut you off on the highway, or you can be sitting in meditation with the most exalted spiritual personage on the planet, or you can be, lost in drunkenness and sex and indulgence. And what's the difference? It's always just this. It's always just this. And that is finding what this is, as opposed to this kind of subtle gamesmanship of sort of chalking up imaginary spiritual points by by claiming we've engineered ourselves into some kind of superior condition or superior state of consciousness.
I find my egoic self has very definite preferences.
Certainly. But there's a big difference between preferences and the supposition that you're actually getting anything or losing anything from that. in the sense I'm talking about. I mean, I prefer good chai to, bad stale Coca-Cola. Bad stale flat Coca-Cola that's been open for 4 days and someone pissed in.
Yeah.
With a cigarette butt floating in it. I definitely prefer the good chai. But
You're starting to tip the scales for me, though.
It's a cigarette butt.
better and better. Damn. Tell me more.
Tell me more about that.
How good was the chai? How strong is the preference?
But again, but preference is again a characteristic of energy flow. It's kind of like focus. It's a spontaneous sort of a resonance, isn't it? And that a preference, the existence of a preference, is a miraculous, inconceivable, subtle energy resonance, or whatever. And what the fuck is that? It's a mystery. And then the instance of expression of the preference is again an open uniqueness of Is the preference met? Is the preference not met? Is the preference 83.5% met? Is, you know. And whether the preference is met or not met, it's all still this inconceivable. Yes. The preference is to stay alive when you're on your deathbed and you're fighting and you want to, you know, you either want to stay alive and you're pissed off about it or you want more morphine or whatever. That's just the way the energy is resonating, the way the energy is flowing, and it's in that motion of its functionality. But what is the functionality and where does it come from? You know, same place as always, this, right? What functionality put you in this room? Why are you here? You know, you could say it's a preference, you could say it's a confluence of miracle, you could say it's, I mean, you know, just all of these ways of putting it, but it's just the simple functioning of this, which is what does everything. And whether you're whatever state, you know, supposed state or of consciousness you're in, if you're, you know, feeling spiritual or feeling worldly or distracted or caught up in ideas or sort of open to the nuance and subtlety of it all or whatever, what's doing it? What's doing any of that? What's it made of? What's it consist of? Always just this. It never departs from itself. It never departs from itself. You can't lose it, you can't gain it. You can't get more of it, you can't get less of it. You can't improve it, you can't detract from it. And discovering that, you've discovered the absolute, you've discovered the ultimate.
But the way, but it's always appearing different too.
Always appears differently, yeah. Astounding. But it's not dependent on how it appears.
No.
It doesn't gain anything from appearing one way and it doesn't lose anything from appearing another way. And you can't ever even say how it's appearing. It's definitely appearing exactly the way it does, but you can't even say what that is because how can you get a handle on it? It's exactly this in all its specifics, but what's that?
Right.
You know, it's
Now, certainly that experience of this is different than the experience of this at the beginning, where we were aware of what is. It seems like the context makes a difference.
But does it make an actual difference? Because the context is imaginary. The actual condition is always the same, isn't it?
Just knowing that changes it.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that's always the case, and no, does it really change it? Does not knowing it make it other than it is? It may make it seem other than it is. It may make it not be noticed or appreciated as it is, but does it really make it other than it is?
So losing the perspective or having the perspective doesn't make a difference.
Right. And seeing that is freedom from dependence upon a particular perspective. It's freedom from dependence upon needing to hold on to something and needing to achieve something.
Really, there is no condition, because we're talking about condition, which makes it seem like there is a condition.
Right.
Which kind of is very confusing because it doesn't seem like there's a condition.
Bingo. Yeah, I mean that's the thing, whether or not it seems like there's a condition. Can you find a condition? Can anyone find a condition here? If so, please spell it out.
Yeah, C-O-N. So even the perspective, like saying
Any
I have a
perspective.
perspective,
It's a con.
what, sorry?
It is a con, spelled C-O-N.
Yeah, any apparent condition, any perspective is imaginary. It doesn't actually exist. And it made of this, is being done by this, exists in this, is being experienced by this, always, without any greater or lesser degree of any of that ever
And it's so funny because the way that sounds is like something concrete, you know, like this, you know, what, you know,
What this?
you know, but it's a good, you know, it's like, it almost makes some thought to say, oh, to identify this, or, you know, it's exactly like that. So when you're saying this, you just say, you're using, I mean, you're talking about something that can't be described, really.
It cannot be described. But it's the only thing to talk about.
Right.
Because it's the only thing, and it's not a thing.
Some of that makes sense. But, yeah.
So when that triggers a sensation of vastness and space, that's just a distraction.
No, there's no distraction.
Well, I mean
That's a version of it. Just like distraction is a version of it. Just like getting caught up in a sense of smallness and specificity and suffering is a version of it. And the one is not in any degree whatsoever different than the other.
It doesn't matter one way or the other.
Doesn't. You can go in the closet and you're still in space. You can come in the living room, you're still in space. You can go outside and you're still in space. You can hop into an Apollo capsule and fly to the moon, you're still in space. So what's really the difference? You're in deep space wherever you go.
Your awareness of space, how vast space is perceived.
But what does that mean? So what? Is vastness better than non-vastness? And what exactly is non-vastness? What exactly is vastness? Yeah. Space in actuality has no size at all, so there is no vastness. I mean, by all means, experience vastness, but experience it critically. You know, like, okay, here's the vastness. Cool, what is it? And even the vastness will be a doorway into something else. There are no final conditions. Anything you find is just a doorway into otherness. Yeah. There's no final conditions.
This is very interesting because it's evident that there's a constant flow, you know.
Well, you say that again, but and I agree with you. Certainly, it's evident there's a constant flow. But again, look at that constant flow. Is it really constant? Is it really a flow? And again, you get a doorway into something else, some more inconceivability. And whatever that inconceivability is, will be a doorway into just endless doorways, doorways, literally endless. There's no final door. It's not like you finally get through some door and like, oh, great, that's it.
Yeah,
it's always it. You go through the door, and yeah, that's it. But it's a door. And you go through that door, and yeah, that's it. But it's a door. There's no final version. There's no final condition.
I can't really even say that. Like that it's a constant flow.
That's the point, yeah. But it's meaningful to say that, and you can go into that space, so to speak, and yeah, there's constant flow, and that's really astounding. But every aspect of this reveals its astoundingness. The focus and distraction and getting caught up in fantastic obsession with supposed event is astounding. You know, the constant immaterial flow is astounding. The infinite ungraspability yet infinite specificity of this is astounding. Every aspect of it is astounding. Whatever you are with relationship to it, astoundingness is being revealed nakedly and obviously and devastatingly. It's not like you go. I'm going to get through a few more doorways, and then it's going to really be astounding.
Right.
That's more gamesmanship.
Yeah.
That's the fantasy. You know, this is the astounding. It's always astounding right here. Whatever it is, that's as astounding as it gets. And then you go somewhere else, and that's as astounding as it gets. And there's no improvement or detraction.
It feels really free.
Yeah. That's absolutely free. very nature is free. I mean, this is what liberation consists of, not the achievement of some final condition. It's freedom from this endless obsession with gamesmanship. Freedom from this endless obsession of trying to get some condition. And no matter how subtly we have this game going, of, oh yeah, that's it, right, it's right over there, that's it, I'm close. It's right here, always right here.
In any way, yeah. In any
And it
way.
doesn't matter what it looks like. And even if it's over there and you want to go over there, you won't have gained anything, won't have lost anything, so go over there, or not. Who cares? But, to get free of that hook, that subtle hook of that carrot on a string.
That's a bit of a trick.
If I just
That's a
get
carrot.
more in touch with silence, if
Yeah.
I just get more open, if I just experience the vastness, if I just really,
I just go to the raw energy of them.
yeah,
If I could just get to that place
yeah,
of getting rid of all these things.
yeah, sure, that's more of the same.
That's more.
Yeah,
Which brings up the fact that there is no understanding.
yeah.
And people seem to spend a great portion of their lives trying to understand,
Mm-hmm.
or trying to make other people understand.
Uh-huh.
It's delay. It's only delays.
There's no understanding, but there's constant revelation, which is probably where the fallacy of of understanding was generated.
Yes.
Since there's all this incredible revelation, the non-stop, endless revelation of astounding hyperintelligence, there's the fantasy of
Understanding.
doing something with it, needing to have it or own it or communicate it or...
Yeah.
What's remarkable about that revelation is that it's meaningless.
Yeah.
It's absolutely meaningless.
Yeah.
It's,
It's astoundingly full of inconceivable meaning, which is absolutely
Right.
meaningless.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
Astoundingly inconceivably full of inconceivable meaning.
and
Of meaningless meaning.
that is also love.
Absolutely.
And that is also what you said.
Love.
It's love, it's harmony, it's beauty, it's
Peace.
Peace.
peace, it's
Beyond
radiant
understanding.
creativity, it's
So
divine benevolence, it's the
Ultimate peace.
the rain of blessings. It's all of these wonderful religious images. It's literally that. This is literally that. These are all those things referred to exactly this
Yeah.
in the nature of this very unstoppable reality right here. They're poetic references to this right here. It's right here, right now.
You want to warm up?
Oh, good. I'll go in a minute. Thanks.
Good times.
Good times, bad times. You know I've had my share.
Now that. Not a feeling.
I hear you, honey.
I hear you.
What words come after that?
What's that?
What are the words after that?
You know, I've had my share because my girl left home with a brown-eyed man, and I just don't seem to care. That part didn't seem quite so appropriate, so I sort of let it lie.
Yeah. Would have bugged you for a long time.
Peter, when you're talking about being caught up, which we're all so familiar with, in something, the only I'm trying to think what being caught up means, and I guess in our context, being caught up in something and losing focus just means forgetting to notice, not being able to notice.
Well, yeah, but more specifically, it means an imaginary orienting towards this with an imaginary agenda, with an imaginary goal, with some imaginary something you're trying to achieve or trying to orient yourself towards, or whatever, in more or less subtle or gross way, which amounts to the same thing, as you said. But I'm pointing more to the mechanism of it.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to, the mechanism of it, because it's a problem.
Yeah, but it comes from holding some condition as actually existent.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's the fundamental error, is holding some condition to be actually existent, and then orienting yourself towards wanting to achieve it, or wanting to leave it, or wanting to whatever. But anyway, you're oriented towards it with some kind of an agenda. And of course, the ultimate solution is to see that no condition actually exists. So there's nothing whatsoever fixed that you can possibly orient towards meaningfully. And when you see that, when you see the truth of that, absolutely, which happens to be the case, then that whole mechanism is diffused. There is nothing that actually exists that you could orient yourself towards. There is nothing that actually exists that you can achieve.
I mean, separate from the...
Separate or not separate, or in any way whatsoever. There's just not, there are no things. There are no conditions. There's just this inconceivability. You know, the noun is inconceivability, the verb is inconceivability, the adverbs and adjectives are inconceivability. So what do you do with that? You know, like I'm saying, if only inconceivability could achieve inconceivability.
Now, I might think that I can see resistance to the...
And resistance is inconceivability.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, that then that if you say nothing to orient towards, these, again, something like... And then if I can see, then there's and then there's resistance, and I can say, there's resistance to that, what do I do? It's the same thing. It's actually going into the same place.
Exactly.
They're like trying to make a
You're
project.
holding that there is resistance, i.e. creating a thing,
so
creating a
I can't
condition.
even make it, resistance doesn't even apply. I mean, it's not even...
No thing exists. No condition exists. Period. Including resistance.
Right.
Anything you can put a word to does not actually exist as an object, or as a subject, or as an anything.
It's a done deal. I don't have to it's not even I don't have to...
Yeah. The only actual thing or condition there is already is in effect. So orienting yourself towards it or strategizing with regards to it is absolutely meaningless.
Right.
This is already being this. So it's like, do you need to achieve it? Do you need to resist it? Do you need to accept it? Do you need to fail at it? Do you need to succeed at it? I mean, it's like all of these terms are just, they're worse than gibberish. They're just, it's like, you know, all of these terms only make sense if you have some subtle or not so subtle belief in some thing actually existing that you can then orient towards in any way whatsoever, plus or minus.
The Enlightenment story then becomes kind of a foolish posture.
Totally. It's more subtle gamesmanship.
Yeah.
Enlightenment is simply the natural condition, which alone always obtains. So this is enlightenment, always has been, always will be.
It's all right for the enlightened one to say that.
Huh?
It's like my brother saying that he doesn't need to tell anybody when he's getting all of my father's money. Knowing that he already has it anyway.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But it is had.
Unenlightened land.
But there is no unenlightened land. That's the point.
Yeah.
Unenlightened land is another thing that's held to exist if you hold it to exist and then you orient towards it. Maybe in a negative sense of wanting to get away from it. But the point is to see that none of these conditions actually exist. So orienting towards them, orienting in relationship to them in any way whatsoever, or strategizing in relationship to them in any way whatsoever, is meaningless. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't actually orient toward them, but I hear them tossed around as terminology quite regularly.
Yeah.
Enlightened one here, enlightened one
Oh
there.
yeah, of course.
So I have a little part of my terminology that I'm not sure what to do with that. It's sort of a blank spot where I just leave it over there in the undiscussed area.
Yeah. But that's where all terminology truly belongs, because it's all up in the air. Nothing actually exists in the way that it's being referred to. So all of our words are essentially gibberish. And yet we can use them because we have the capacity to use them. The words are themselves an expression and a mode of this inconceivability, so they are that inconceivability. They partake of its qualities and its nature, and of course fully express that inconceivability. So they're right on the money. They're a home run each time. In their lying, erroneous, inaccurate selves, they are direct expressions of reality, paradoxically.
What's interesting is how we continue to create those sort of goals toward which we appear to orient.
Yeah, and that's one of the native modes of this inconceivability. Is that it can do this, that it does this. It orients towards itself in this mode, in this way, from time to time, into to one degree or another. And again, none of that is fixed. You can't even find that. You go looking for that, you can't find it. And yet it's self-evident. It's self-evident because it's this. This is that which is self-evident. It's a good definition of this.
Well, once you take the mantle of a story about awakening and then sell that as a condition, then you've incarcerated yourself and everyone else that comes to visit. And it pisses me off.
Have at it.
I
I think a class action suit's in order. I can hook you up. I got some.
Get some attorney fees. I'm going to sue everyone at the conference.
But seeing that is liberating.
It is. It's ultimately liberating.
So it's worth seeing.
Absolutely. There's nothing else worth seeing. And yet seeing that is just simply seeing what's always the case.
It's like what is what already is what is. That's all there is.
Yeah. Beginning and end of it.
And if you're creating something to get, you're just creating something to get.
Yeah, in a fantasy. And you'll never get it because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Which is great if you feel like if you see that, right? You can play with that.
Well, if you see that, it's liberating.
But if you're not
liberating is kind of fun.
You're not seeing
Yeah. If you're not seeing it.
and you still.
Well, the question seems to arise, I think what most people are probably trying to get at, but I'm trying to get at a little bit too, is in the moment when you've been fired and you're walking out of and you're deciding whether to go to the bridge and jump off or get a gun and shoot the boss.
Right?
You're not
Just fill out an unemployment form.
Get a bus ticket. It's a decision.
What what is a practical trick? I mean, this I know. Well, what would be a practical, to pull that mind? Because that mind or that attention is really.
Don't bother. Don't bother. You're not going to pull any attention anywhere.
Well,
Pocket.
It's the most sacred mantra.
My guru told me.
Sorry?
When someone's so depressed.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't. That's the,
Fire your boss.
anything for the common man.
Who are you? The common man?
I would say, wangle yourself some good luck.
Yeah, there you go.
And good luck with that.
And what I have to do in practice is I have to come back and sit down in a chair and calm down, and then I'm there again. Then I got it. But when I'm in the midst of that, at least in my present state of whatever it is, very seldom can I stop right there and say, okay.
But again, you're caught up in notions of that it's useful to stop and to get something, versus just letting go with the flow, so to speak, which is meaningless because of course the flow is already happening. So it's not like you can not let go.
Right.
I mean, try not letting go sometimes. See how much good that does you.
Right.
I mean, suddenly drawing a dichotomy between being caught up versus not being caught up is again more subtle gamesmanship.
I agree.
And we come out of that when we spontaneously develop sufficient spiritual maturity, to coin an imaginary phrase,
That's a trick.
to poke our head up out in that situation and notice, oh wow.
Just to have presence of mind to catch that and say, wait a minute.
But not even to catch it, just to stop trying to catch it in a more profound sense.
Well, I'm not really even trying to catch it there. I'm just caught up.
Yeah, no, for sure. But there's no problem with being caught up. The only problem with being caught up is thinking there's a problem with being caught up.
All right.
Because being caught up is this.
Right.
Being caught up is this, what you call a continual flow. Are you ever not caught up in the moment? Even when you're like in clarity and sitting in peace, you're caught up in that. I mean, that's what the continual flow happens to look like. Or that's what you designate, that's what how you're naming it or describing it or conceiving of it as looking.
Good point. You turned it around. I'm always caught up.
Of course. It's always just this. And this is always exactly caught up in itself. But when you look very closely, there's nothing there that is caught up, and there's nothing there to be caught up in. And yet it's always exactly this.
It's just degrees of being caught up that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, but they aren't even really degrees. It's just different flavors, endlessly different, endless uniquenesses of flavor that present themselves moment to moment in the continual flow.
No experience of being caught up is similar to any other experience.
It's exactly the same. It's always the same. It's the only difference is if you're drawing a difference, which means you're holding a subtle. Again, you're holding the existence of some subtle entity called being caught up, or called not being caught up, and then you're orienting towards that subtle entity. And in actual fact, no such subtle entity exists. Gross or subtle. There's no such thing as being caught up. There's no such thing as not being caught up. It's always just...
I don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
But there are flavours.
There's endless flavors.
I mean, I got started in the 1960s rock and roll thing after that. It's still there.
It comes with age.
But it's just the same. I mean, it could be
That's the point.
staring at the sun.
Yeah, totally. People get caught up, people think they're caught up in yoga, or think they're caught up in making money, or think they're caught up in self-loathing, or think they're caught up in, trying to impress people or get some social standing and all these different things. And none of them are what they pretend to be. They're all just this astounding unfoldingness, this astounding revelation of inconceivability.
Well, the way I would phrase it is, I mean, at any moment where I can come back and take your advice and say, this is it, that would get me uncaught up. I mean, that would put me in touch with what's here.
Yeah, but see, again, you're still caught up and not caught up.
No, I am. I know I am. But that's more pleasant than.
Okay.
It's a benefit.
Okay.
Well, then you could just be caught up in
But see, that's okay. That's so that's what I said about luck. So karmically, that's where you are. You're relating to your inconceivability in those terms, or however you actually are, is being described as those terms, and that's the mode that you resonate towards. Right? That's the mode that you sort of find yourself enacting, and you will do so until you stop. And again, of course, even that's not a continuous thing because you're in many modes simultaneously, to one degree or another. But even when you're in these modes, you're not really in those modes because those modes are just this. The modes don't depart from this, they're the modes of this. Ignorance is a mode of reality. Confusion is a mode of reality.
I guess it's a matter of, at least from the way I'm approaching it right now, as a sadhana, what I'm not talking about sadhana, is to remember that this is a mode of,
yes,
as opposed to not remembering it.
Yeah, and we'll remember it and then play with and then as a further, more subtle sadhana, notice that not remembering it is the same, is remembering, is a mode of remembering, you could say. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. There's endless ways of playing with it.
There's no way to discriminate this to say that you're in one condition versus another. You're ignorant versus enlightened, or you're.
There's no conditions.
Yeah.
That's more holding as something to be holding this to be a way, and there are no ways. No way.
Yeah.
No.
Never. Right?
No
way. So even if you can imagine that you're feeling forgetful or enrolled in fantasy, as opposed to being lighter on your feet and more aware, there's no meaningful discrimination there. There's no meaningful advantage there, because they're actually just stories told always after the fact.
Yeah. Sure. It's just like a dream, It's like, what did you dream about? Well, I dreamed about this, that, and the other. There's no this, that, and the other there. It was a dream. It was, just a pattern of ghosts.
And that's this.
And yet we, I dreamed about this, and I dreamed about that, and I meant this, and I really wanted that, and I blah, blah, blah. It's just ghosts. It's just wisps. Trick of the light. Excuse me, this is it. So they make this an official, right? Not that ever stopped. Right?
No, right? Everyone's saying
official.
good. Do it.
What? No. No.
Drive me nuts.
See that?
Water.
Nope.
oh, it's like that. Oh, right. Just comment on that. Oh, right. Okay. Is that better than noticing? Oh, God.
Is it ever not this? Is it ever not here? Is it ever not now? Is here not always a meaningless notion, is now not always a meaningless notion.
I think it's good when if there wasn't anything.
There isn't.
But just that there's nothing.
It's good.
When this comes into being, this is it. That's this.
Yeah, that's it.
And
This is
it's
it.
doing it by itself.
Yeah.
And
It's the whole story.
that's what you get. And
Yeah.
that's all it is. And
That's it. That's it. Beginning and end.
incredible.
Alpha and Omega.
And you can't get anything else.
No, of course not.
This
It's always just this.
This is what you got.
Yeah, 'cause when you get something, what is it?
You got this.
Where is it? Here. When is it? Now. And what is it? This.
There's this.
This is what you got.
Yeah, this is it. This is all there is. It's always this. It's never other than this. It never departs from itself. It never adds to itself. Always looks different. And you can never say what it looks like. Oh, it's always a radiant, inconceivable revelation of uniqueness. And there's no end to how much you can notice that. There's no end to how profoundly you can notice this inconceivability, this astoundingness. And that can be a lot of fun. I recommend it.
Better than wanting something better.
Not better? No, not better.
Well, I mean, that's what the search is. You want something better.
Yeah. But again, that's predicated on the fantasy that either there is something better or there is something worse. And neither is ever the case. Because there's not anything. And you can't say whether it's better or worse because it's not a thing.
Well, that you could get something other than what's already, than this.
Get back to us on that one.
So, check me out tomorrow.
Well, thinking intellectually about it, just conceptually, if I really saw the thisness of this, the no thingness of this, I wouldn't be there anymore, would I?
No more or less than you are now.
Right.
Because the idea that you're here is another thing that you may be holding
But I
in your
mean, I would be a
imagination.
part and parcel of that call it a vision or that understanding. There is just the no thingness of this. There wouldn't be a guy who recognizes that.
Of course not.
That guy would be a part of that, and thus that guy would be gone, thus the problem would be over.
Well, yeah, but the problem is only there because you suppose there is a guy and there's no evidence of that because there is no guy, there's just this.
Right. But if I saw this, the point is, there's a sense of there's somebody who understands something. I mean, we're
Right.
back to that paradigm.
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
There would be nobody to understand it.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
There is nobody.
Well, I take your word for that.
Well, look and see. Whatever understanding there is, what's doing it? Where does it come from? And is it anything other than this?
Oh, I looked for that, yes.
Well,
I couldn't find anything.
well.
But it wasn't conclusive enough.
In the Dzogchen books, in the Dzogchen text, the best Dzogchen text, they say over and over, look for it and you won't find it, and when you don't find it, that's finding it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's there when you're not looking for it. And it just goes away.
Kind of like the refrigerator light.
Very tricky.
That's a nice image.
But whatever you find, it's how you're looking at it.
What does that mean?
Whatever you find, it's just...
If you think you're finding something, you're imagining it. Because you never find anything. All you find is this, and if you think this is something in particular, you're imagining that, because what this actually is unfindable as as a specific thing or condition.
Right, it's just...
So if you think you found a thing or condition, you're imagining, which of course is this.
It's not what it is, right? It's just how you're approaching it, or how you think you are experiencing what you are. It's just...
It's fantasy, it's illusion, it's insanity. You're nutso. Technical term.
Not so.
That's very nice.
Not so, not so.
Not so, not so. In Sanskrit they had this wonderful Sanskrit term for nutso, which means samsaran. Samsaran. You're samsaran. You think you exist in a world.
It's like samsara. It's like
Yeah.
the plural of samsara.
Well, no, samsaran is the person who is engaged in samsara.
Like
Samsaran is like a person of
I
samsara.
see. Like the nutso.
So that's Sanskrit for nutty cuckoo, which is a technical term. It's a technical term for thinking you exist.
thinking you're a resident.
It doesn't really apply to anyone at all, though, does it?
Nope, not in actuality.
What, not so?
So there's nobody driving the bus.
No, there's no bus. And so of course there's no one driving.
I need to pay full fare.
Not yet, the donation basket is there.
Not only that, we're looking for the best driver. That's really good, Peter, when you're not here and you do that, when you kind of peer into the screen. It's really good for us because we feel like you're really just giving us all the juice.
That's very funny because when I'm actually there, I'm trying to read the clock and the person is I'm blind to the back. So.
I totally realize that, but nevertheless, it's sort of one of my transmission.
Hey guys.
Thousands of people out on the internet are shivering as I look at the clock. The comedy never ends. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he has to look up.
You can pull down the clock menu. what's sentience then? I mean, sitting here, quiet in my mind or quiet verbally in the group, there's this. I mean, it's unmistakable that there's this. And consciousness, awareness, sentience, sensation, the movement of thought. Well, these are just hints, wisps, ghosts, elements that arise in this.
Yeah. And again, you can't find them as separate entities. You can't find them as things.
No.
You go looking for them, and there's nothing. You can't find what's there.
Yeah.
They're just doorways into more doorways.
Yeah, they're more like doorways than conclusions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're modes of ways that this is seeming to be, and when you look at those seemings,
Mm-hmm.
they reveal themselves as mirage-like versions of something subtler or whatever.
Right, they never conclude. They always remain open.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it never departs from this, and always obviously is this.
Yeah.
So when we say there's consciousness, we say there's energy.
Right.
I mean, with all these different modes, we can impute as being, aspects of this or components of this,
Signatures,
or subsystems, or
sigils.
signatures, or echoes, or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, we go looking for these things, and we don't find anything that's discrete. We don't find anything that has any separate identity or any existence as a thing in any sense. It's like a mirage. It recedes as we approach it, and
always.
And we're here always, and it's here always, and the mirages come and go.
Yeah.
And
at that level of subtlety, we can speak about it as mirage and always receding, and you can never attain. You can see that, right? Viscerally, clearly see that, and yet it's such a profound portfolio of ghosts and hints and giggles and whispers that can be turned into a self, being self-existent in a world suffering.
Well, this is what is one of the most astounding aspects of this. Is how prolific it is at generating these versions of itself unendingly.
Yeah.
This astounding radiance of versions, of resonances, of implications of phenomena of something happening. There's something happening here, and it seems to have all these aspects.
Yeah.
And the fact that it generates or is the basis for the apparition of these phantoms.
An entity in time.
Yeah, all that. I mean,
Right.
That's what I meant by this principle of ongoing revelation.
Yes.
It constantly displays itself to itself, and in that display is readouts that are pregnant with implication, and it, of course, is profoundly intelligent and receptive. So it picks up on these implications and spins them off, and hence we have all of this experience of possible entities and possible systems and possible functionalities.
Yep. Instantaneously.
Yeah, and it's inherent. It's inherent.
It's inherent.
It spins off.
It's not like I'm doing any interpreting, or I'm doing any creating, or I'm doing anything. This is of its inherent nature.
Yeah, it does everything. It is everything. It's the substance of everything, and it's the agent of everything. And there is nothing in nothing. So it is actually it actually generates the implication of substances and agencies and so on and so forth.
Right. That's funny.
It's very funny. It's very, very funny.
Especially we look at the New Age bookstore. It's funny.
Yeah. Never-ending joke.
Yeah. $12.95, please.
It's a good way to make a living as anything else we're doing. Isn't it?
Selling water by the stream.
It's a profound insight.
It's the profound insight.
Right.
It is so information dense.
Profound. Yeah.
It is so intelligence dense.
Yes.
I mean, intelligence equals information equals creativity equals,
Yeah.
you know, imaginativeness, and by that very nature, we have all of this implication.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the information, the content of the information is just itself. So it's information dense with infinite versions of itself,
Yes.
and the versions aren't even versions.
Right.
They're implications of versions that suffice to imply actual divergence, actual multiplicity.
Ari.
But when you follow any data point to what it is, you get to this.
Yeah.
So there's only one thing being said here. It's just being said in infinite different ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a profound gift that we can hone our observation, our language, our attention, our suspicion to see this
Yeah.
so practically,
Yeah.
rather than shrouded in orange robes and swahas.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
But it inherently and unerringly expresses itself,
Mm-hmm.
so therefore it can express itself. And these are modes of it expressing itself. So of course it can express itself.
Yeah.
Well, isn't any other mode expressing itself?
Of course.
But less consciously.
No, there's no other modes. There's no less consciously.
Yeah. No, there's nothing other.
Well, you talk about it in terms of appreciation.
Sure. But unappreciation is appreciation. In other words, appreciating it unappreciatively is actually appreciating it. Again, we talk. It's semi-meaningful to talk about the process of spiritual unfoldment, and the spiritual quest, and the spiritual path, and all these things, which are really only meaningful to talk about because this has the inherent mode of maturing to itself, of moving into more subtle modes of appreciating itself. And as we piggyback along in that, we think of it as our spiritual progress or our spiritual unfoldment, but actually it's its own inherent maturing in its modes of relating to itself. But again, the modes, but its maturing is not actually an improvement. The oak tree is not an improvement on the acorn. It's just an unfoldment. It's an unfolded expression. It's a mature version, and it matures with relationship to its versions of itself that it experiences, that it appreciates,
So to speak.
so to speak.
So to speak.
Always.
It's almost that maturation is a subtle quality of the expression of unfolding.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're one and the same.
Yeah.
The apparent unfolding actually consists of it maturing with relationship to its own relation with itself.
Yeah. Right. And its expression is unobstructed and unfettered and always infinitely creative. So never ending.
World without end, amen. Why don't we take a little break? We'll be back in about 10 minutes or so.
Or 1,000 years. Stay tuned.
We're live. Don't say anything you don't want the CIA to hear.
Peter, out there. There doesn't seem to be anything inherent in the seeking or trying to find process that would bring one to not finding as an answer, I mean, it's like there's always another rock to turn over. There's always another.
But finding that there's always another rock to turn over is finding, because you're discovering that there's no finality. You're discovering the infinite openness that this is.
But where in that is would that be exhausted?
In maturity. This is the normal organic way. This is how we mature as humans. No, we go around and we do things and we do the same thing over and over and over, and eventually we get it through our thick heads that wait a minute, let's move on to the subtlety, there's refinement. When you're a kid on the schoolyard, someone takes your lunch money, you go and try and take someone else's lunch money, and if you're big, maybe you succeed, and you do this for a while, but eventually after doing this repetitively, you'll learn, or not, there's other ways of approaching it, and we grow beyond our accustomed modes that we're used to engaging in. It's a natural mode.
Then you make amends and you try to track those people down.
And there's always a mutagen in the system, because nothing repeats. Everything is always a little different, so there's always an X factor that's thrown in that takes things and spins them off into other ways. So it's impossible to really be in too much of a rut, because by the very nature of it, you'll end up being spin off into something else.
But that's part of the process, isn't it?
Yes, that's the very nature.
But of the searching, isn't it? Oh, it spins off.
Yeah, but searching isn't searching. Searching is just the mode of this. It's one aspect of one way of designating what this is. When we're spiritual seekers, we call it searching. When we're teenagers, we call it becoming an adult. When we're
well, there does seem to be what I'm noticing is kind of collapsing back. Collapsing to this, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with what I'm doing. Is that along those same lines?
Well, there's no lines. And spinning it is collapsing back again is more putting interpretations on it. Mm-hmm. It's always unfathomable. It's always unfathomable. And coming to see that unfathomability looks like what it looks like, or you call it what you call it at the time that you're approaching it in the way that you are. Right? You can call it seeking, and then you can call it collapsing back, and you can call it letting go, you can call it, and all those different things, but all of these designations are again trying to collapse it down to something, trying to say, oh yes, it's this. But it can't be collapsed. It's not a thing. It's not something that you can orient towards. That's just more subtle gamesmanship. And yet the process of discovering that is, subtle gamesmanship is the process of transcending subtle gamesmanship. Or we can say, the process of transcending subtle gamesmanship looks like engaging in subtle gamesmanship.
Could you say no matter what's happening, it's consciousness experiencing as a resonant mode?
You can say that, but then again, you need to look very closely at what you refer to as those things, and because you can't find consciousness, and you can't find experiencing, and you can't find resonant mode. I mean, that's certainly not, that's not an untrue statement.
It's like all you're going to get is another resonant mode.
Yeah, but resonant modes aren't really resonant modes. So you actually aren't getting resonant modes.
It's a way of saying that no matter what you do, where you go, what happens, it's only a take on something that is just perceived at that moment that way.
Yeah, but what it is that which is perceived at that moment that way. That's what it is. Its very nature is to be. Yeah, its very nature is to look like this at the moment.
So immediacy is not a resonant mode. Like the immediacy.
Nothing is a resonant mode.
Nothing is a resonant mode, but the interpretation of saying this is a resonant mode.
Yes. And yet it's meaningful to talk about resonant modes because this has a tendency to gravitate towards ways of seeing itself, ways of relating to itself, ways of sort of...
And then that's where we find out too that it's not a resonant mode.
Right. Because it's not a thing, it's the nature of this to be that which appears to be that.
So it's inherent in itself.
Yes.
In itself.
It's all inherent. There's nothing that's not inherent. It's like a black hole, everything collapses. I mean, not that it does nothing to collapse, of course.
The impulse to deify and anthropomorphize and create a supreme, being, an author.
It's just the same mechanism that generates self-image run amok.
Mm-hmm.
It's using that same mode, taking it to its nth degree.
Right.
It's anthropomorphizing yourself. You may as well.
You may as well go to a deification level as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost it's kind of a reverse that we've created God in our image rather than God having created us in hers.
Yes. Yeah.
Of course. B minus.
B minus? I'm good. I passed. Or this, right. There's not one, there's no human that precedes a creation of God. There's no God that precedes the creation of human.
Well, all of that is an unnecessary elaboration. It's just
Is this? B plus.
And this is that which appears as if it might be doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Can we crack the window a little bit? Is it cold back there?
No.
Dun, dun,
What'd you do with it?
I don't know. Stage dancers and
Another
He
fancy
flung it like Marilyn
It's
Monroe.
like Tom Jones.
I'm gonna start doing that.
That's all. Seems like you covered it pretty good.
There's something to cover?
Well, it is interesting, Peter, that we seem to like move around into different areas. You know, that energetically we find ourselves, you know, having a resonant mode section, and then later, do you know, like there are distinct changes or variations in the theme.
Yeah, there's no end to the mobility of consciousness, and it moves in and out, and it tends to gravitate more or less loosely to various modes that it sort of revisits from time to time, but always uniquely and always in a different way. But it's always this apparent mobility, isn't there? There's nothing fixed you can find, there's nothing stuck. And even these modes that seem to have some degree of familiarity always reveal a newness, they always reveal a novelty and a uniqueness, and the presence always a surprise, always a surprise. So there's always constant revelation, even when it's in a guise that has a familiar flavor, but there's always newness there. There's always a startlingness, a surprisingness, an unpredictability. You know, the present moment, the experience of the present moment is always completely unpredictable. There's no way you can know you're going to be experiencing this. There's no way. It's just exactly that. And it's a complete surprise. It's always a surprise. It always reveals newness, new aspects of itself, new nuances. And there are these sort of familiar flavors that ghost along, but there's always this astounding novelty in the context of those flavors. And then when we look closer at those flavors, they are morphing and revealing newness too. So.
Is Kundalini just another set of flavors?
Well, it's a metaphor for the spectrum of flavors. And the rising of the Kundalini means access to the full spectrum rather than tending to go to this or that sort of home base where you're used to gravitating towards. When it's all open, then it's just every possibility is all there, is all the same, is all, has the same value and the same availability. And you don't lose anything by going to one, and you don't gain anything by going to one. There's just an endless flow.
It seems to me that when I find some new area, it has more value, maybe because it's new.
Well, the newness, because the newness is discovery of openness. But ultimately you discover that newness is the inherent characteristics of it. It's always new. Newness is its very nature. So it's not like we explore and discover a full spectrum and that we sort of reach an end. On the contrary, we discover that the spectrum is made of newness. It consists of inherent newness. Yeah, it's infinite, never-ending newness, never-ending revelation. It's not like the revelation's like sort of begins to wind down and peters out. It's always new revelation. Every moment, wow, this has never happened before. This has never happened before. And the insights, the subtle insights that sort of sparkle in the moment, they never happened before. And there's a never-ending, literally never-ending fountain of insight. But none of them are final, none of them are keepers, none of them are the finished version. And yet all of them are the finished version. It doesn't get any more finished or any more final. So every revelation is the final revelation. And then
back to the drawing
more, and then another final, and then another final. It's always, you're continually crossing the finish line. Every instant you're crossing the finish line. Yes, this is it. Yes, this is it. Yes, this is it. And the only thing that keeps us from noticing that and appreciating it is we think that what do we know what the finish line is supposed to look like. We have fantasies, no, this isn't it. This isn't the finish line, this can't be like this. It's not, it doesn't look the way it's supposed to. This isn't a revelation of inconceivable reality in the absolute. Like, oh yeah, prove it. Every instant is a revelation of inconceivable reality in the absolute. Nakedly. With nothing hidden. Every instant, bang, this. 100% this. 100% this. Forever and ever and ever. It always looks different.
Bear with me while I put my head back on.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah. The bolts rolled away.
Don't touch the flowers. Hey, lady, don't touch the flowers.
It's really that simple. Every instant you're crossing the finish line. Always have been, always will be.
But even then, what is an instant? What is an anything?
Trying to make sense of it won't get you anything.
The mind won't, yeah. Like bored. To even conjure a phrase or a concept, to frame something into words, of course, comes naturally and effortlessly, and there's still like a very subtle seed in there where it has to orient around a certain kind of vector to express something. Otherwise, it's not to be found.
Pick a vector, any vector.
Any. Yeah. Yeah, none of them, none of them are to be found. Where's the body? What's the mind? What's the spirit or soul? Inwardly, and the fact of this is always profoundly undifferentiated and never concludes. So to even have those, objects and have stories about them is absurd.
It's very simple. Just be with your experience in the moment and notice how it's inconceivably subtle and nuanced. And as you notice that, it reveals even more subtlety and more nuance forever. And just that subtlety, just that nuance is the very nature of what this is. It's very clear and very nakedly revealed.
Hallelujah!
Haribol.
Well, I can't think of anything to fix.
meeting's gonna need to break.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What is the precursor to the sense of time?
Precursor? You lost me.
What causes the sense of time?
The
I want to
nature
feel
of
a
this.
sense of
The
time.
nature of this.
Can you drill down a little bit more than that?
Not really. Time is
Be willing to be.
very, very, very subtle. And if we think we know what it is, we are dealing with it very coarsely. When we look more closely at exactly what time is, exactly what is happening in this presence, in this present moment, it turns out to be very, very subtle and very interesting. And the closer you look at it, the more subtle and the more interesting it becomes. And pretty soon you realize nakedly that you're looking at this. You're looking at inconceivability. Where it's obviously completely actual, and yet you can't find it. You can't find what it is. You cannot pin it down. And that is exactly what this is. This is actual. This is real. This is reality. And yet you can't say what it is. You can't pin it down. You can't find it. You can't. You approach it. It doesn't converge to a single simple thing. And you can say, yes, this is what it is. You go to it, and it's this. It's always right here. It's very obvious, very certain, and yet completely unfindable. Completely unfindable. And the more closely you look, the more unfindable and the more mind-boggling and astounding it is seen to be. And that's a description of time, isn't it? Same with space. I mean, same with anything whatsoever. Try and find choice. Try and find will. Try and find consciousness. Try and find awareness. Try and find energy. Try and find objects or objectification. All of these things are self-evident in the sense of there's an obvious and undeniable reality present. But the more closely you look, the less you find, and the more astounding it becomes. And you look closer and closer, and it's more and more astounding forever. And you never actually come to a point of finality. You never actually it doesn't converge to something, a single simple thing. It opens forever. Its very nature is an infinite opening. And you look, you see this. You look, you see the opening. And you look closer, and you see more opening. And you look closer and you see more opening. So opening is what it is. It's the very thing that it is an endless opening, an endless revelation. which is astounding and miraculous and inconceivable, and yet self-evident. So all these simple qualities that we think exist, any simple quality, time, space, light, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. To pick, go to the encyclopedia, open it at random, and pick a category, and then try and say, okay, yeah, that is real, and then try and look in your experience and try and pin down the actual reality that it actually consists of, and what do you find? Endless opening. You never get to the final thing. You never get to the bottom of what it actually is. And yet it never recedes. It's always right here. It's an astounding condition.
It's the complete opposite of petering out.
No pun intended. Although for me it was actually petering out very specifically. This infinite depth is right here. You don't need to go into it, it's right here, it's so close. And you go into it, and where are you? It's right here. Infinite depth, infinite openness, but it's right here.
So I can have thoughts like, this goes back to earlier tonight, I can have thoughts like, there's realization and I'm not realized. And then those are but beliefs in some condition. And then the condition, how does one decondition the belief in a condition to this exploration that you're talking about?
An easy way is to look at something you think you have and see if you can find what it is. Like, okay, so like saying you're born to be enlightened or something. You can't really look at that because that's somewhere over there, far away.
Right.
But I'm not realized. So that if that's true, it must be right here. So you can look at that. Okay, let me find my unrealization. What's it made of? How is it happening? What's doing it? what actual present phenomena is here that I can accurately call I'm not realized. And when you look at that closely, of course, you won't be able to find any such thing. And what you do find will be astounding, and that astoundingness will give a lie to the notion of it not being realized in any sense. So that's one way. That's the sort of the deconstructive way, piece by piece. Then there's the getting to the root of the problem, which is much more powerful, but also depends upon luck or grace or what have you. And that is to see conclusively in the present moment that no definable condition can exist.
Right.
And of course, when you look for any condition and not find it, that's evidence, cumulative evidence towards that conclusion. And then you look for something else and then you don't find it, and so on and so forth. And you can do that, n number of times, and eventually you can extrapolate, well, gosh, I've never found anything conclusively. So maybe there is nothing, maybe finding something conclusively is a fantasy which is not based in reality.
Right.
Or you can go more directly to the very substance of experience itself and discover that it is inherently indeterminate, i.e. incapable of resolving itself to something that is a definable condition or something findable.
Right.
And you can do that, and that's a much more powerful way, and you can do that very directly in experience any time by just looking at what is experience, what is actually happening here. Does experience lend itself in any way inherently to resolution of a condition or an object or an entity?
Yeah.
And if you look, you will find, if you look sincerely and clearly, you will discover that that's an impossibility. And therefore, in one fell swoop, all those sorts of notions are undermined without needing to deconstruct them one at a time. But either way will affect that.
When I look, that's what I see as far as I look, and then I can see how also if I thought that there's a condition is a thought.
Yeah, exactly. And then look at what that is.
Right.
So if the thought that there's a condition turns out to be a thought, then if there is an actual condition, then that thought must be a condition. And so then look at what the thought is. And again, what I predict what you will find is it opens into something that's unresolvable as anything in particular. And so therefore this condition resolves itself into nothing that's resolvable.
Right.
I.e. is not definable as a condition.
But it continues to resolve.
Well, it continues to resolve, but it never resolves. It continues to unresolve. It continues to do what it does, but it can't be said exactly what that is, which is the unresolvability itself in action, up close and personal.
So we have to just skip right over that to presume I'm a person that's not awakened, which is just such a silly, set of conclusions. Drawn from where?
It's a leap to conclusion.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful to be in denial about the insubstantiality of the basis for that conclusion, of the non-existence of any evidence for that conclusion.
To put it in your wheelbarrow and walk around with it and insist on it from moment to moment.
Yeah. And we do it by a bunch of mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
One of our most powerful mechanisms is denying the indeterminacy of our experience. We write it off to a failure of our experience. Oh, I'm a fuzzy perceiver, but there's clear things there to be perceived. So the fuzziness is my fault, but these things are actually there. And the fact that they seem fuzzy is just because I'm
not seeing clearly.
I'm a B plus. I'm a C minus. I'm not an A. If I was getting an A, then I'd like C and no B.
Yeah. It's fuzzy all around the house.
Yeah, but if we see that this fuzziness, this indeterminacy is actually inherent in being itself, in experience itself, you can never find anything that's not fuzzy, and you look at the fuzz closely, and it's fuzzy.
Yeah, even
You cannot find non-fuzz.
Even the fuzz
You cannot
is fuzzy.
find determinacy. You cannot find a sharp edge in reality. You cannot. It
No.
cannot be found.
Yeah,
It cannot. Be, science acknowledges this.
right.
There's no sharp edges.
Tachyons, quarks, yeah, go
All
all
of
the way.
it,
Yeah.
all of it,
And they
all
can't
of
find
it.
a single particle.
There is no sharp edges. There's no specificity. Everything is fuzzy. Everything is indeterminate. Everything is spread out. It's diffuse.
Yep.
So that's the nature of the beast. So in this diffusion, how can you find any certainty? How can you find it's anything where you can say, yes, this is definitely this, and that is definitely that? You only can do it by denying the inherency of the diffusion.
That self-evident fact has to be denied
Yeah,
to then imagine that this is objects.
yeah. And it's easy to do. We all do it. We all have a very strong experience of doing this, so it's obviously doable.
Yep.
But it's not based on anything but itself. It's based on fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, this is not based on anything but itself. So we have precedent. Well, technically it's quitting time, but if anyone has anything else they'd like to chime in with, we can. Well, I'll say good night to our friends online, if any.
Good night.
Good night.